joined now by Jacob Carpenter, who's one of our investigative reporters in the newsroom, and he's been tracking the deaths at the Milwaukee County Jail. So Jacob, you had a very interesting story, an important one that posted yesterday about how there may be some criminal charges afoot in this case, or at least the first indication of what these outside investigators may be looking at.
Yeah, we did. It was part of a motion that was filed the other day in court related to the inquest in the Terrell Thomas dehydration case. And in there, they do say that a potential relevant charge that they would be looking at would be abuse of an inmate. And that is a felony. It is the lowest classification of felony, punishable by up to 3.5 years in prison. But it is the first time that we've seen an indication of who could be charged. Although we don't have names, we do know that it would be jail staff and what that potential charge that they could be looking at would be.
Right, and the way they would be defining abuse here isn't, say, striking a person. This is like withholding water or
the title of the charge is abuse, but it also would include neglect or I believe ill treatment of an inmate.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit more on this issue about a story you've got going that's posting this morning and available in print tomorrow on a survey you did of all the deaths in all the county jails across the state and how those sheriffs have handled those cases. What did you find?
Well, we wondered, with Sheriff Clark in this case, his administration did get an outside investigation into one death at his jail, but not in 3 other deaths. So we wondered what's typical. And we found that in about 60% of jail deaths that we looked at all across the state over the last 5 years, we found that 60% of them did have an outside investigation, usually with that outside agency coming in right away, a few times with the local agency doing their own investigation, and then asking for a secondary review by an outside agency.
All right, so it shows that here, at least in Milwaukee County, we might be a little bit out of step, but there isn't a lot of uniformity in that
there is
approach.
not uniformity for sure, and it's a decision that under state law is strictly up to sheriffs. So there is kind of an all over the map element to this.
Yeah, well, let's lastly talk about, a few years ago, a law came through for people who die in the custody of police officers, so outside of the county jails and other places, and that requires an outside investigation to take place as a mandatory situation. Is there any move afoot to do something similar for deaths once they're in custody in a jail?
Well, the Milwaukee County supervisors definitely, they've already voted that they want a state law on that front. I did talk to Senator Chris Larson, who's a Democrat from Milwaukee, who said that he's in the early process of looking at and drafting a bill. Nothing has been introduced, and he didn't really have a sense at this point as to whether there'd be an appetite for that, particularly in a Republican legislature. But there is at least some talk of it at this point.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you very much for that update and for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.